Imagine you have just made, like, the single most devastating mistake of your entire life. You stood on the precipice of everything you ever wanted, you gave into fear, and you just watched it all slip away.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And now you are facing a 40-year sentence in this barren, unforgiving wasteland because of it. May God richly bless your day and this upcoming week, and welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are looking at a masterclass in how you rebuild a shattered society from absolute zero.
Right. From literally nothing.
Exactly. We are exploring the 15th chapter of the Book of Numbers, and we're relying on the deep historical and theological insights of the Holman and NWA study Bibles to, really understand what happens the morning after a catastrophic failure.
Well, it is an incredibly heavy place to start.
Right.
But to really grasp the brilliance of chapter 15, we have to understand the sheer crushing despair of the chapter right
Oh,
before
the
it.
despair is just total.
Yeah, the Israelites are in this emotional and physical freefall. I mean, they had just sent those spies into the promised land. They heard reports of fortified cities and giants, and they just entirely lost their nerve.
They completely panicked. They refused to go in.
Right. They refused. So God handed down a really severe consequence. Basically, that specific generation would not enter the land. They would have to wander the desert for 40 years until a whole new generation grew up.
And I mean, their reaction to that sentence just makes everything so much worse.
Oh, yeah.
In a total panic, they try to reverse their mistake by, forcing their way into the land on their own, completely without God's backing. And the result is a massive, bloody slaughter.
Yeah, they are completely routed by the Amalekites and the Canaanites at a place called Hormah.
Right. They're driven back into the desert, just utterly defeated. So picture the camp at this exact moment. You have grieving families, you've got wounded soldiers, and this agonizing realization that the rest of their lives will be spent looking at sand.
Morale isn't just low.
It has ceased to exist.
Literally. The psychological devastation is total. They are a people without a home, without a victory, and seemingly without any future at all.
And the natural expectation here is that God is going to abandon them, right? Or at least put them on a 40-year silent treatment.
Right, but the text does something astonishing. The narrative doesn't dwell on the tragedy. God immediately begins laying out highly specific laws for the future, which signals this massive pivot in the story.
And that pivot really hinges on one specific, incredibly powerful word at the very beginning of the chapter. God starts giving instructions for offerings, and he says, when you enter the land.
Yes. When?
Not if you survive this desert. Not if you behave yourselves for the next 4 decades. When you enter, it is a concrete guarantee delivered at the exact moment they felt the most disqualified.
It's incredible. And the study notes highlight just how monumental that phrasing is, especially when you look at the actual materials required for these new offerings.
Right, because God asks for sacrifices that include fine flour, olive oil, and wine.
Which poses a rather obvious problem.
Yeah, to put it mildly, they are trapped in a desert environment. Those materials are virtually non-existent. They are surviving on manna, this miraculous daily provision falling from the sky. They don't have vineyards or olive groves out there in the sand.
No, they don't. And that is the absolute genius of the command.
Yeah.
By demanding agricultural products, God is initiating this massive paradigm shift for them. Manna is all about immediate daily survival.
You pick it up, you eat it, you hope it's there tomorrow.
Exactly. But flour, oil, and wine, those require long-term investment. They require you to plow the earth, to plant seeds, to tend vines for years, and, harvest in cycles.
So God is handing them recipes for a settled, abundant agricultural life while they are literally still staring at a barren wilderness.
Right. He's forcing them to look past the sand.
It is a stunning psychological strategy. The closest modern equivalent I can think of is imagine a parent dealing with a teenager who just spectacularly failed their final exams.
Okay, yeah.
The kid is sobbing in their room, convinced they will never graduate, their life is over, and the parent walks in. But instead of yelling, the parent hands them a receipt, and it's a deposit for their high school graduation party venue.
Oh, wow. I love that.
It communicates, you failed today, but I am already investing in your tomorrow.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. And the investment here scales up dramatically, too. The text outlines that if you bring a lamb, well, it requires a certain measure of grain and wine. A ram requires a larger measure. A bull requires even more.
It's an escalating scale of celebration.
Exactly. The study notes point out that this wasn't just about burning food. It functioned as a joyful, generous, communal meal hosted by the worshiper. It was a mandated celebration of an abundance they had to simply imagine for now.
And the text also establishes something called the first fruits of the dough, right?
Yeah.
The Israelites are told that when they finally harvest that grain and grind their meal, the very first batch of dough belongs to the priests.
Yeah, it's a tangible anchor tying their current wandering to that future promise.
Right.
And the historical continuity of that practice is actually quite beautiful. The study sources note that this specific command is the origin of a tradition that is still symbolically observed by Orthodox Jews today.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah. When making bread, like challah, a small portion of the dough is separated and burned. It is an unbroken chain of memory stretching all the way back to this exact moment of desperate hope in the desert.
Wow. So God secured their future by making them physically plan for it.
Precisely.
But, giving them hope for the future creates a new, very practical problem. If they are going to actually survive the next 40 years in the wilderness and build a functioning nation, they need a radically different societal structure than the fear-based one that just collapsed on them.
Oh, absolutely.
Which leads the text to shift from future promises to the immediate rules of this new society. And it starts with a surprisingly radical concept of equality.
It really is radical. Because in the ancient Near East, society was profoundly tribal and strictly hierarchical. Your bloodline determines your rights, your access to the divine, and, your treatment under the law.
Right.
But Numbers 15 repeatedly insists on one law. It states explicitly that there is one law for the native-born Israelite and the exact same law for the foreigner or immigrant living among them. Both have equal footing.
Equal access to bring these offerings to God. To establish that kind of level playing field in the ancient world is staggering.
It's unheard of, really.
It essentially says that your place in this community isn't dictated by your genetics, but by your shared commitment to the covenant. And part of participating in that covenant is figuring out how to handle the inevitable moments when people mess up.
Right, because they will mess up.
Oh, for sure. So the text draws a very careful, specific distinction for what it calls unintentional sins.
Yeah, the ancient Hebrew framework categorized these as sins of ignorance, omission, or just simply unpremeditated mistakes.
Like you didn't know a specific regulation or you acted out of sudden, unthinking weakness.
Exactly. And the text establishes a structured system of grace for this. If the entire congregation accidentally strays, they offer a bull and a goat. If an individual slips up, they offer a female goat. The process provides a very clear path back to forgiveness and communal standing.
Okay, I want to pause here for a second because I think a lot of us reading this today, we hit a wall with the mechanics of this grace.
How so?
Well, if God is all-knowing, he already knows the sin was just an honest mistake, right? So why demand an expensive animal sacrifice and blood atonement for an oops moment? Why not just require a sincere apology and a promise to do better? The whole production with the goats feels incredibly heavy-handed for an accident.
It's a very fair critique from a modern perspective. Today, we tend to view sin purely as a moral failing or just a bad thought.
Yeah, exactly. A broken rule.
Right. But the study Bibles help us reframe this through the ancient understanding of ritual purity and absolute holiness. To the Israelites, God's presence in their camp wasn't an abstract concept. It was a tangible, intensely powerful reality resting right in the center of their community in the tabernacle.
Right. I mean, they literally had a pillar of cloud and fire dwelling among them. It was a physical presence.
Exactly. And in that worldview, sin, even accidental sin, wasn't just a broken rule. It was viewed as a physical, contagious pollutant. It created a literal stain on the community. Think of it like accidentally walking into a highly sterile, sensitive laboratory with muddy shoes.
Oh, right. You didn't mean to contaminate the clean room. It was an honest mistake. But the mud is still there, the experiment is in jeopardy, and a sincere apology won't clean the floor.
Perfect way to put it. The environment still has to be physically sterilized before work can continue.
So the blood of the sacrifice acted as that ritual detergent.
Yes. In the presence of absolute holiness, an infraction causes a rupture that makes the space unsafe. The sacrifice demonstrates that God takes his own holiness and the safety of the community living next to it incredibly seriously.
So he provides a mechanism for grace so they aren't destroyed by their mistakes.
Right, but the significant cost of the sacrifice is a visceral reminder that even accidents carry dangerous weight.
It forces them to live mindfully, but that grace and the careful system provided for unintentional mistakes sets up a terrifying contrast for the next section of the chapter.
Yeah.
Because the text pivots to what happens when the contamination isn't an accident.
Yeah. The text introduces the concept of sinning deliberately, or as the Hebrew translates, sinning with a high hand.
That imagery is intense, a high hand. It evokes a raised fist, right? A posture of open, aggressive defiance.
It is the posture of someone who fundamentally despises God's word and authority. And for this kind of premeditated, rebellious sin, the text is chillingly clear. There is no sacrifice available.
None at all.
None. The sacrificial system simply does not cover open treason. The person is to be cut off from the community.
And the text doesn't leave this as a theoretical legal warning, which is the really heavy part. It immediately provides a grim, real-world case study. A man is found gathering wood on the Sabbath. He's caught. He's held in custody. The community knows that working on the Sabbath is strictly forbidden, but because they are still establishing their legal precedents, the exact method of execution hasn't been declared yet.
Right.
So they bring the case to Moses, and ultimately, God orders that this man be taken outside the camp and stoned to death by the entire congregation.
It is, without a doubt, one of the most difficult and abrasive passages for modern readers to process.
I mean, we have to linger on that discomfort because to our ears, executing a human being for picking up a few sticks on a Saturday, it sounds barbaric. It sounds completely disproportionate and cruel. We can't just brush past the severity of a whole community stoning a man to death over firewood. So how do the study notes contextualize this?
Well, we really have to shift our perspective from a modern individualistic view of religion to an ancient geopolitical reality. The study notes emphasize that this incident was not about the sticks. It was about what the Sabbath represented.
Okay.
When Israel made their covenant with God at Mount Sinai, the Sabbath was the ultimate visible sign of that treaty. It was the constitutional foundation of their new nation.
So it was the flag they flew to show who they belonged to.
Yes. To violate the Sabbath deliberately with that high hand was not a lapse in judgment or a moment of weakness. It was a public, premeditated act of high treason against the king of their nation. You have to remember the intense fragility of this specific historical moment.
Right, they have just rebelled at the edge of the promised land.
Exactly. They have just been slaughtered at Horma because they wouldn't listen. Their entire societal fabric is hanging by a single thread in a hostile desert.
So if one person is allowed to openly, defiantly mock the core foundational law of the community without consequence, the whole structure collapses. It's like a soldier in a highly vulnerable military unit deciding to light a massive bonfire at night in enemy territory just to prove he can.
Yes.
It puts everyone's survival at risk.
That is the exact geopolitical stakes we're talking about here.
Yeah.
In this crucial, delicate, early moment of Israel's rebuilding, a definitive precedent had to be set about open rebellion. If that high hand was ignored or tolerated, the nation would tear itself apart, descend into anarchy, and die in the desert long before the 40 years were up.
Yeah.
The execution was a severe, desperate measure to preserve the existence of the entire community.
Wow. Understanding the survival mechanics of the ancient world definitely changes the lens, even if the reality remains really harsh.
It does.
But what is truly fascinating to me is that God doesn't just leave them with the terrifying threat of execution to keep them in line. To prevent people from ever reaching that point of fatal, defiant rebellion, the chapter ends with something entirely different. It introduces this remarkably practical, wearable psychological tool.
It is a beautiful shift, really, from the severity of communal punishment to a tool of daily grace and personal remembrance. God commands the Israelites to attach tassels or fringes to the corners of their garments, and he gives a highly specific instruction. They must include a single blue cord within these tassels.
This feels like an ancient predecessor to modern behavioral psychology.
Oh, totally.
When people want to break a destructive habit or build a positive one today, psychologists recommend physical interrupts. You put a rubber band on your wrist or a brightly colored Post-it note on your mirror. It's a physical, visual trigger designed to catch your eye and literally interrupt your brain before you act on raw impulse.
That is precisely the function of the tassels. But the study notes reveal that the symbolism goes much deeper than a simple memory trick. In the ancient Near East, the hem of your garment, and specifically the fringes you wore, were public indicators of your social status, your wealth, and your overall identity.
But why specify the color blue? I mean, in the ancient world, producing a brilliant blue dye wasn't easy or cheap, especially for a bunch of nomads living in tents. Sourcing a specific color like that implies it carried an immense cultural weight.
Oh, the cultural weight was profound. Blue was an incredibly expensive, rare dye extracted from sea snails. But more importantly for the Israelites, blue was the exact color heavily featured in the inner curtains of the tabernacle God's dwelling place.
Ah, Okay.
It was also a prominent color woven into the sacred garments of the high priest. By commanding every single everyday Israelite, regardless of their social standing, to wear this blue cord, God was wrapping them in the colors of the sanctuary.
He was giving them a constant visual reminder that they were not just a ragtag group of displaced refugees. They were meant to be a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. So every time a farmer reaches for a tool or a mother reaches for a child, they see this flash of sanctuary blue on their own clothing and remember their highest calling.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the linguistic connection here ties the entire chapter together brilliantly. The instruction tells the Israelites to look at the tassels so that they don't follow after, or some translations say, prostitute themselves to the desires of their own hearts and eyes. The original Hebrew word used there for follow after or seek is tur.
Wait, does that word show up somewhere else in the narrative?
It does. It is the exact same Hebrew word used just chapters earlier for spying. God is making a direct, pointed linguistic link back to the spies who just ruined their future.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the spies went into Canaan, relied solely on what their physical eyes saw, the giants, the towering walls, and their fear led the whole nation into catastrophic rebellion.
That is an incredible insight. Do not spy on your own heart. God is basically telling them that their eyes will deceive them, just like they deceived the spies in the Promised Land. They looked at the obstacles instead of looking at the promise. The blue tassel is the physical antidote to that visual deception. It stops you from gathering evidence to support your own panic.
It acts as a profound psychological safety net, really. A daily mechanism to keep them tethered to reality when their impulses try to pull them away. And what is truly remarkable is how deeply this practice embedded itself into the culture. The sources note that this command was faithfully kept for centuries, echoing all the way into the New Testament.
That immediately brings to mind the Gospel of Matthew, right? Where the woman who has been bleeding for 12 years reaches through the crowd just to touch the edge of Jesus' cloak.
Yes, exactly. The study notes explicitly connect that moment to this passage. When she reaches for the fringe or the hem of Jesus' garment, she is reaching for these exact tassels commanded in Numbers 15. She wasn't just grabbing fabric. She was reaching for the very symbol of holiness, covenant, and divine authority that had been instituted in the desert thousands of years prior.
Wow. So, what does this all mean for us as we pull these historical threads together? We have traced an incredible arc of reconstruction in just one chapter. I mean, we started in the absolute rock bottom of grief and failure, watching God reassure a broken people by forcing them to plan for a harvest they couldn't even see yet.
Right.
We saw the radical establishment of equality before the law and a system of grace that takes the dangerous reality of our mistakes seriously. We sat with the severe, terrifying boundaries required to keep a fragile society from tearing itself apart through open defiance. And finally, we looked at the beauty of a simple, wearable reminder designed to interrupt our worst impulses and tether us to our true identity.
It genuinely serves as a masterclass in how restoration works.
Yeah.
It demonstrates that rebuilding requires a firm vision for the future, absolute clarity on the boundaries of behavior, but also practical, everyday tools to help flawed human beings actually walk that line. It acknowledges human weakness while providing a tangible system for grace and memory.
Which leaves you, our listener, with a final thought to mull over as you step back into your day. We live in a modern world characterized by constant information overload and endless distraction. We are constantly surrounded by temptations to follow our own immediate impulses, to rely purely on the panic our eyes see, and to forget our longer-term commitments when things look like giants. You may not wear a fringed garment, but what would your blue cord look like? What physical thing in your daily life could serve as a constant interrupting reminder of your highest values and your ultimate purpose?
Yeah, something tangible to stop you from spying on your own heart and remind you of who you're meant to be.
Find your blue cord. Thank you so much for joining us for this journey through the text. As we wrap up, we want to remind you once again that God blesses all the listeners. Have a wonderful, intentional rest of your week, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.